Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Setting the Record Straight with your host Josh and Bill. Today we're going to be discussing flashlights. There are a lot of flashlights. Just on this table alone, you might get a little bit overwhelmed in what they are and what they do, how many lumens and all that crazy stuff. But there are thousands and thousands more out there. And you might be trying to figure out what would be best for weapon lights, handheld lights, backup to your backup of your backup light, and what kind of batteries, all this stuff. We're going to try to answer all those questions for you as clean and precise as possible. At least we're going to try. But first off, I'm going to hand it over to Bill. He's going to talk about some terminology and what you might be hearing and reading and being really, really confused about. So we're going to clarify that for you before we start getting into the tech stuff.
So just to go over a couple of nomenclature issues, there are a lot of terms that are thrown around out there, and it can get very confusing if you're not sure what specific terms mean. So the two big ones that you'll see in terms of output on the light itself are going to be lumens and candela. Lumens, that's a industry standardized measurement, and basically it refers to the amount of output that is being put out by the light source. Just totally in all directions, no specific path or anything like that. And as such, it's useful because it tells us how much the emitter is emitting, but it may not be as relevant to what we're actually seeing, how usable the light is. And that's where candela gets in, because candela talks about power along a specific path. So what is actually being reflected downrange on a specific path, and how bright is that going to end up being?
Pretty much how focused.
How focused the beam is going to be. So candela is the focused path. The lumens just refers to the overall amount of light that is being emitted. Now, not all lights are equal, and a lot of the difference between the two is going to come down to the reflector and things of that nature internal to the light, how well that light is focused on that specific path. So you may get two lights that are 1500 lumens, but they have very different candela and very different output as far as the focus down the light beam because of the reflector and things of that nature. We also want to talk about throw, spill, and hot spots. Those are terms that you're going to hear. Throw is how far that light is projected in a usable fashion. So when I'm talking about illuminating something downrange, how far downrange can I actually see what it is I'm looking at? Will that light stay coherent and give me a good idea, be able to identify what it is I'm looking at? Spill, also called corona, is going to refer to the splash on either sides of, yes, I use my hands a lot. Spill is going to refer to the splash on either side, which is important in some applications if we're using the light as a search device, because I want to have additional light on either side so that my peripheral vision will come into play and I can identify things that maybe I'm not directly shining the light at. Hotspot goes back to the throw. That's going to be that bright center spot. And again, depending on the application, that may be something we want to be more defined or less defined, depending on how we're using the light. When we get into what do I want and why do I want these things, so let's go back first of all and define, why do I carry a light in the first place? What is the purpose of this light? Well, succinctly, it's to see in the dark. Now, I carry a light so that I can see things in the dark or in low light. Light is information, information is power, and particularly when we start talking about defensive type situations using firearms, self-defense sort of stuff, I have to be able to identify what it is that I'm dealing with. Before I can shoot something, I have to identify it. In order to make that conscious decision to fire, I have to positively identify what it is. And we see this in self-defense situations, mistaken identity, bad shootings kind of thing, because people see a shadow, they aren't sure what it is, but they shoot it anyway and then realize the shadow should not have been shot. Yep. If you can't identify it, then we can't make a conscious decision, we can't actually shoot it. We need to be able to see. Now, there are a couple of myths, and we were talking about one earlier.
I learned this the hard way. I was shooting my first night match, and I didn't really have flashlights, so I just pulled whatever flashlight I could find. I was just looking for any flashlight to put on there. 500 lumens should do, 400 lumens should do, 300 lumens should do. I should be fine. I could see in the dark with it. Until I got to the match and started shooting, trying to shoot things at a little bit further distance. One shot, there's a plume of smoke because it was humid, and now I can't see anything. And it was because the flashlight was being, or the light was being absorbed into the surroundings and the smoke and everything like that. And I quickly realized that there's a very big difference between high quality flashlights and what they specifically do with those things like throw, spill, hotspot, all the candelas, all the lumens, all of that. And so I learned in kind of a way that more light better. You know, it's like if somebody's telling you that, you know, I'll only get 300 lumens, 400 lumens, 500 lumens, because if you put it onto a wall, you're going to blind yourself. It's going to be too bright for you. What happens if you can't see? Yada, yada, yada. And Bill knows more than me, but I got a few, a few things in my brain where when I was shooting, I couldn't see anything. And when I was closer, it really didn't matter. I was flashing it directly to the wall at home, trying to see how much I couldn't see. And with a 1500 lumen flashlight, I was perfectly fine. So again, there's a lot of things that you'll hear and people say, but without real information to back it up. So Bill's gonna kind of explain to you on the job type stuff and how he came to be a true believer, just like me, that the more lumens, the better.
It's definitely better. And to touch on one of the first things you said, again, not all lights are equal. And that's where that candela, that ability to punch through that cloud of humidity, of smoke, of whatever, is going to be very important. There is a prevailing myth in the industry that you can have too much light. And you'll hear people say this, oh, you only need 200 lumens or 300 lumens, and that's more.
It's the same people that say that's too much ammo.
Yeah, you only need 8 rounds in the gun or whatever the case may be. I can tell you from having done literally thousands of live entries into all kinds of structures, big structures, small structures, houses, trailers, warehouses, industrial parks, office complex, the whole 9 yards, back when I was doing fugitive stuff, and even before that in my uniform days, doing active shooter training and things of that nature, you cannot have enough light, period. It's not necessarily, this is where people get confused, it's not necessarily about being able to see the target to shoot the target. You can actually shoot quite well in almost no light. Mm-hmm. If you have a good index and can bring the weapon up consistently, you can shoot quite well, even not being able to see what it is you're shooting at. But that is the key when we're talking about real world stuff, and even with competition, if you're doing a low light competition match, you have to be able to identify, is that a shoot target or a no shoot? Which one am I supposed to be shooting? Steel targets that blend into the background, things of that nature. You did the Halloween match where you hid stuff on us. Good match, but it was very challenging because you couldn't see what you needed to see. And that's really the key about the weapon light, or the tactical, the handheld light, is it's not about the shooting portion, it's about identifying what it is you need to shoot. And that's where the more light comes in. The more light, the better, to help you see what you have to see and identify what it is. Is that a threat to me? Is it not a threat? Is it a shoot? Is it a no shoot? As far as being inside of a structure and the idea that it's going to blind you, first of all, the techniques that we utilize take that into consideration. You don't walk around in the structure with the weapon up at eye level. You're going to be in a ready position somewhere below your line of sight, and the light is not going to be bouncing back directly into your eyeballs. Even if that happens, you walk into a room, the weapon does bounce off a mirror, the light does bounce off a mirror rather, move the light, okay? It's not that big a deal. I've gone into small rooms that had mirrors, didn't realize when I walked in, because it's not my house, I don't know what's in there, and we just adjust the direction of the flashlight. It's not that big a deal. More light is better, period, end of story. I can't emphasize that enough, because we hear that all the time. You don't need that much. Even in an outdoor situation, in low light, 15, 20, 25 yards, you can get to a point where with a 200 lumen, 300 lumen light, you cannot identify what's in someone's hand. You think that it's a weapon, you think that it's a cell phone, you're not sure. You need that light to punch out there and actually be able to see what it is. If you can't, then your only other alternative is to aggress that threat, get closer, which is not ideal. If we have the ability to engage it at range, that's always better for us. But since we have to make the conscious decision to fire, our only option is to get closer, which, like I said, is not ideal.
Let's try to get into some specifics as far as what flashlights do what weapons platform is going to be good for these specific flashlights. So you have handheld flashlights, pistol-mounted flashlights, flashlights mostly used for rifles, carbines, and stuff like that. And so trying to identify which one goes on what, because you can take a pistol light and stick it onto a rifle and be pretty okay. It wasn't designed for it. The switch is going to be all awkward and weird all the way up. Most of these rifle weapon lights have pressure pads either connected to it, like the Owl from Cloud Defense or the Surefire Pros. They have a tail switch that comes out and mount onto the gun. Makes it a lot easier to position where you want your hands to go. And then, of course, the pistols, they have little nubby things to reach when you're grabbing the gun with your finger. So we got a whole lot of lights here. We're going to kind of explain to you how they all work and size-wise, what to consider for carry or just like house defense or something like that. So I'm going to hand it over to Bill, and he's going to tell you all about these things.
So our two big categories we're going to break down initially are handhelds and weapon lights. Each has a role. And ideally, I would advocate that you incorporate both into your everyday carry. At least the handheld. You got to have a handheld. The weapon light is more optional. A lot of people don't want to put up with the additional bulk and weight. But I think that it is definitely worth it depending on the environment that you're going into, and just it's a personal decision. In my case, I have kids. I may be corralling one of my children as I'm having to do something, and I'm not going to have that second hand to manipulate my handheld. So the weapon light gives me options. And then just fundamentally, most of us can shoot a lot better with two hands on the gun than we can with only one hand on the gun. Even utilizing some sort of two-handed handheld technique that does incorporate the hands coming together, still it's not as effective, and we're not as competent usually as if we have a proper two-handed grip on the weapon.
And as Bill said, if you don't have a handheld and you just so happen to have to pick up a friend's gun or an enemy's gun to have to use it and it's still really dark, how are you going to use that weapon without a flashlight because they didn't put it on their gun?
It gives you
or at least
options.
You have your own flashlight.
It gives you options. And there are a lot of things that we use the handheld light for that are not defensive in nature. We drop something in the dark and we have to illuminate it. It is frowned upon to use your weapon light as an illumination source. You'll see it in the news. Most police agencies have policies that prohibit officers from utilizing the weapon light as an ordinary illumination device, because we have seen videos of officers issuing citations to a motorist. Here, sir, go ahead and please sign right there, press hard, there are 5 copies, and they're using the weapon light as an illumination device, and of course wherever the weapon light is pointed, so is the muzzle. So the handheld gives us a lot more options, a lot more versatility in day-to-day life, because we will use this for more than just defensive purposes. With the handheld, you can get small ones, you can get big ones. With today's LED emitters and whatnot, size does not necessarily indicate overall power either with lumens or candela. So look at the specs on what you're trying to get and figure out what's going to be most appropriate for you, what's going to fit best with your lifestyle. We have some that are smaller, we have some that are larger. The light that I currently carry as my handheld everywhere I go is a mod light handheld. This is the PLH head. This is the first gen, and this is an outstanding light. For your handheld, you're probably going to want good throw, but you definitely want some spill, again, for that search ability that I talked about earlier. You don't necessarily want something that's going to illuminate right there as you do on a weapon light. You want something that's going to allow you a bit more peripheral information if you're out searching, if you're just checking the backyard for a noise that you heard or something along those lines. We've got, go ahead.
Then you got some stilettos from Surefire that make it a little bit easier to carry something with a little bit more power than maybe one of these smaller flashlights. So it's nice and narrow, or rather flat. So when it's in your pocket, it kind of just looks like a little clip. Take it out, it's a nice big flashlight.
And a lot of options there. It has the belt clip built in. You'll see several of my lights are equipped with this device. This is called the Theorem Switchback. You can get them on Amazon, you can get them direct from Theorem. And it's a really nice piece of gear. It just bolts on underneath the end cap. Gives you the clip, gives you a finger mount, so if you're walking along and your hand pops, you're not going to drop the light. It does lend itself towards manipulation when we're incorporating this with a handgun. Even with a rifle, it gives you something, a better index point. Highly recommend them. There's a little pressure thing there that you can strike with. So highly recommend that. Having the ability to clip it into your pocket and keep a consistent index is important, and you see several of these have the clip incorporated. This, just to talk about this is an example of when I started law enforcement back in the 90s. This was state of the art. Actually, this is a later version, but the original Surefire 6P with a whopping 60 lumens, and we thought this thing was the bomb. This was the best fighting flashlight that was out there. But you can see compared to the modern ones, very, very basic, no clip, no nothing like that. It was a momentary switch. There was no clicky on, clicky off. You could rotate the cap. We'll talk more about switches in a sec to turn it on. And now we've evolved to something like this, which is 1500 lumens with a rechargeable battery. It's a clicky switch, much better lumens, much better candela, just all around a better light. And it's just the evolution of what we've got here. So that covers our handheld a little bit. For those of you that are interested, some of these are Surefires. This is a Surefire. This is a Surefire EDC, EDC L2-T. The names are getting more and more complicated as we go. This is an old PX2 and a PX3. This is before we got into the dual fuel series, and we're going to talk about batteries in a little bit as well. This is a Surefire dual fuel rechargeable, which gives you the ability to recharge your batteries, which, like I said, we'll discuss that in a second. So this one, what's this one called? I'm not familiar with this one.
This one is the Javelot Pro.
Okay.
It's all integrated as far as battery goes and everything like that. It's rechargeable by a magnetic plug-in charger, so pretty easy to utilize for that. I mean, it's just a honking flashlight, something that if you need all the lumens in the world, this is what you get.
And this would be good for like home defense where you're not as worried about size or something, whereas these are geared more
this is definitely more of a utility piece as opposed to a carry light or a weapon light.
Like the mag lights of old.
They do make a mount to put onto a weapon if you want, if that's the thing you need. But yeah, it's really just like one of those, I need it to illuminate the whole block type thing. So it does its job.
Yeah, and so it's specific, it's purpose driven, and that, like I said, is a big thing. Figuring out what is the mission of the light, what do I want it to do, because that's going to affect how much size I'm going to be willing to tolerate, the lumen/candela requirements. Do I want a tighter hotspot, less spill, all those types of things. So talking about weapon lights, two basic categories, as Josh said. You have weapon lights that are primarily intended for handgun use, and then weapon lights that are primarily intended for long gun use. And there is a degree of crossover, particularly with handgun weapon lights going over to rifles. There is the ability to mount those as needed. Like I said, I do believe in the weapon light, and I do routinely carry a weapon light. My choice, this is my current carry gun. We're going to talk about this in a future video. This is the new Langdon Tactical RDO 92G.
Quite nice.
And very nice. And I normally go with the Surefire X300 series. This is an X300 Ultra Bravo model. It's the 1000 lumen model. The Bravo refers to the fact that it's got the thumb screw or the screw clamp here, as opposed to the A model, which has spring-loaded clips here. And different guns, it will kind of dictate which one you use. The polymer frame guns, usually the spring-loaded ones are going to be a little bit of a better fit, and the steel frame guns you can clamp down with the screw clamp, and that's going to be a better fit. So in handgun lights, probably the best that are out there right now are the Surefire X300 Ultra series. They've gone through several generational increases. They started out 500 lumens, bumped to 600, and now we're looking at 1000 lumen versions. There are a couple of companies that are making replacement heads that will put out as much as, it's like 5,000 lumens. And of course, commensurate loss of battery life, you only get like 10 minutes of runtime. These are about 90 minutes of runtime at pretty solid performance. These are the ones that I prefer. They are bigger, so you are going to need a holster that's going to accommodate them, and there is a bit more bulk involved. Not a whole lot of weight necessarily, but a bit more bulk, but I think the juice is worth the squeeze. There are smaller weapon lights. This one, just to talk about it, this is the Streamlight Tlr-1 Hl. This is Streamlight's version of the X300. Good solid light as well. Most of the agencies that I worked for or worked with, this was the issue light, and it's a good solid piece of equipment. And so in some smaller weapon lights, in case you're not willing to put up with the bulk of these, but you still want to have a weapon light, there are some good solid choices out there. So this is the Surefire Xc1. This is the new version. newer version, I should say. And I believe this is a 300 lumen. It does use a AAA battery that fits in here. So it's very flush. It's designed, most of these smaller weapon lights are designed specifically with the Glock 19 or 19X in this case, sized barrel length, and it's going to fit the light so it's flush with the muzzle. And of course it'll work on your other compact pistols or even full-size pistols, but they're specifically designed usually around the Glock platform to give you a flush fit at the edge of the muzzle on a 19 or a 19X or a 45.
There's something to kind of watch out for with certain flashlight manufacturers. I won't name names, but there are some out there that specifically make lights only for the Glock pattern, but they have a version that fits on everything else.
Yes.
Picatinny. So just when you're looking at flashlights, that's the things to look for. If you have a Glock, it fits a little different than a 1913 rail, but there are some 1913 rail accessories that will work on the. It's just read everything through how it fits and everything like that, and make sure you don't buy a Glock specific flashlight for
Your
a
SIG
CZ
320
or
or
a SIG 320
CZ or whatever.
Yeah, so
yeah, and that's a good call. The Streamlights in particular will come with several adapters, the little plate that goes here. And you'll see on these two, they're actually, this one is marked GL for Glock. Mm-hmm. And this one is marked as Universal-1, which will fit a bunch of different platforms, but they include instructions to tell you which one's going to go where. Because before the industry sort of standardized on the 1913 spec rail, you had a bunch of different rails out there. Glock had their own spec, Smith & Wesson for a while had their own spec, and there are adapters that are available to fit those different weapons because they're not all the same. Going back to the smaller lights, that was the Surefire. This is the Streamlight Tlr-1 Hl. This is the new version that's got the better switches down here. We'll talk about switches in a little bit. And again, this one is geared towards a 19X, 19 size weapon. It's going to fit flush with the muzzle. This is a really good light. The switches particularly are very, very good, and we'll discuss that in a second with switches. And we have the O-Light as well.
Yeah, the O-Light Valkyrie PL Mini 2. It was sort of designed to fit just about any pistol. It has this kind of retractable kind of deal, this rail, that when it's not locked down, you can adjust it specifically to reach all the way to the flush point of your trigger guard, so that way you're not having to reach too far. There's some lights that are kind of awkward, and that's why it's like kind of important to see how they all fit. Sometimes that Picatinny rail doesn't line up just right for you to be able to get the right throw. So this, kind of helps with that. They have this little thing that goes back and forth so you can fit it specifically to a gun. So if you're having trouble finding a light that works with your specific gun because you have some kind of weird set of rail sections, the Valkyrie Mini 2 should probably be one to look at if you're looking for something small.
And that's a good example of some of the innovation that's coming out within the industry. Originally, as I said, a lot of things were built for the Glock, but we have so many good choices now in carry guns that the manufacturers are starting to expand and make things able to fit a wider range because there's a wider range that's available. All right, so getting away from the handgun lights and now going into our carbine type lights. Surefire obviously is one of the foremost brands out there, and they make a bunch of different weapon lights. Their Scout series particularly is kind of what you're going to see these days. They've done a bunch of different ones in the past, integrated into a vertical foregrip, all kinds of different things. But the Scouts are what you normally see now, and they've got the Scout Pro series now, which is the most recent release that has an integrated mount here as opposed to a separate setup that you bolt onto an independent mount. This has the mount incorporated. You can get Picatinny versions, you can get M-LOK versions, and as you see, it fits very nicely and very flush into the handrail system here.
And then one thing that a friend of mine showed me is that one of the big things that they wanted it to do was be able to pivot away from the top rail if you had to put something like a PEC or something like that on there, some kind of laser device, and you didn't want to have to take the flashlight, put it somewhere else. All you got to do is grab it and flip it down, and now you have space for whatever accessory you want to put up there.
For zeroing or whatever you need to do. And a friend of mine and I were working with his mall recently, and that was a huge issue, trying to get a screwdriver in past the light to the 0 points, and having the ability to rotate that light out of the way is quite a benefit. And it's something you don't think about until you actually get out and start working with these things, and you realize, well, geez, that's a good idea. I didn't think it would matter. It does matter. So this is a nice innovation that Surefire's come out with. What we're trying to do when we mount these things, two things: mount them as close to the rail as possible, within some parameters, because you maybe don't want it all the way in. In this case, you could get it maybe a bit closer, but then it might start bouncing off the suppressor. So you have to have some variability there. But closer is better. We've seen lights as we go into structures get caught on something and rip right off of the weapon if something can get caught between the muzzle of the weapon and the light, and as we apply torque, it tears right off. Another thing is the switchology. So having your wires secured and not floating out to get snagged on something, to get ripped, to damage, just to get torqued and whatnot, because the wires are the weak point of the switches here. If this gets worked back and forth enough, it can lose contact. Mm-hmm. So in the case of the Cloud Defensive, for example, everything is completely integrated into one solid package. And you can see this here, how this is set up. And you want to hand me that one. Everything is integrated into the package, no exposed wires. You can use the battery end cap is actually your wrench to tighten and release the clamping system. These pieces, the battery cap can come off and be switched with the lens, the head, and it can go left or right or whatever you want. Really, really good piece of kit. This is my primary teaching rifle, and I've been running this on here for about a year now through a bunch of different night classes and whatnot, and I've been really, really happy with it. We'll come back to this when we discuss switches in a moment. This is another mod light, and this one, particularly one, is a PLH. They also make another one, and I apologize, I always get the terms wrong. It's OKW, OWK, I forget what it is. But I will tell you, it's an amazing piece of equipment. And when we talk about picking something specific for your long gun, something like this might be, and don't quote me on the numbers, but it's around 1,500 lumens and 29,000 candela, I think, is what this one's pointing out, something like that. The other one I spoke about, the OKW, I think that's what it's called, is only roughly 700 lumens. So, it's a lot less lumens. It's 69,000 candela. So there's not a whole lot of spread of that spill, but I've played with them a little bit, and it's like a laser beam. If you're looking for something with, say, a rifle with a low power variable optic on there, and you want to be able to reach out to 100, 150 yards, that's definitely the light to go with, because it gives you a very tight, coherent beam. All that energy is going specifically along that path, and it really punches out a long distance and really extends the usefulness of the light. Ideally, you want the light to, as much as possible, match the capability of the weapon system. So this is their switch that also comes, and it's an integrated mount. It does let the wire get closely squeezed in here, but it is still a wire. Incorporates the push button there. And it's just a nice little package that integrates everything, so you don't have a mount and a light, a switch, and then the light itself. It just kind of makes a more compact setup there. All right, so that talks about basically the different types. And there are a lot more that's out there. This is just what we had available. This is what we use. These are lights that I've used over the years as I've evolved to my current carry light. To talk a little bit about switches. So first of all, going back one step, when you're looking at your EDC light, I prefer a single output. So when I press the switch, it gives me full power. You can get different lights that are set up so that if you press, it gives you 10 lumens, and then you press again and it gives you full power. Sometimes you press, it gives you full power, you press again, it gives you a lower output. And the idea from the company standpoint is it gives you more versatility within the light. When we're talking about something for defensive purposes though, I want, when I pull that thing out to defend my life, which is my worst case scenario where it's really gonna matter, I wanna press that switch and get everything. I don't wanna be clicking through options, strobe, low, high, this, that, and the other. I want to click and get my full output. So that's one thing.
So just a quick question on your idea on one thing that is heavily debated as far as the usefulness on a flashlight, a handheld, or a weapon light. People talk about, I want strobe because I want to confuse the hell out of somebody with it. And from my experience at least, it also confuses me.
Yeah.
So I don't like it at all. I don't want anything that strobes. I want that thing out of there. I just want, like he said, just full power first time I press it. I don't need to switch through anything. But I really don't want the strobe for myself.
Yeah.
You know, some people might like it for some weird reason, but
well, it's like you said. First of all, the light is there for me to identify my target. It's not
for a nightclub.
It's not for a nightclub. It's not for that type of thing.
Prompting
And if the strobe is so debilitating to him, you're going to get some degree of splashback. It makes sense that it's going to therefore have some impact on you. I do not like strobes. I don't want strobes. Even with a regular light, if you really want a strobe, then you can make it strobe. Okay, so you go with a single output switch, you press, it comes on, and then if you want to do other things with it, you can make that happen. But no, I agree completely. I do not like strobes. So switches, a couple of different types that we've got. You've got clickies, which are something, or rather momentaries, which are this. I press, I release, I press, I release. There's no constant on within the button itself. If I want constant on, I turn the end cap, and that's what's going to turn it on. Then you've got clickies, which are going to be, I'm not even sure that's a word, but that's the word that we use, where I can hold it down just a little bit and it's momentary, or I can click and it's going to come constant on. And that's kind of what I like. You'll see a lot of the EDC lights, it's slightly recessed to prevent you from bumping into it when you're in the car and it's in your pocket or something. That's something to look at, because that also means it's a little bit more difficult for your thumb to access. So you can see.
And speaking of switches, there are a lot of flashlights out there that, you know, here at Big Daddy Unlimited, we get some returns because some people are confused at the way these switches actually work. They're wondering why their flashlight doesn't stay on when they flip the switch, and they don't realize that there's actually two different options on the switch. They're just not properly using it correctly. But most of the time they're trying to press it and they're like, why doesn't my light stay on? What's going on? And they don't realize if they flick it really fast, it's going to stay on. And then when you press it for even just a little bit longer than that, it doesn't stay on. So if you have one of these flashlights, like the Valkyrie Mini 2, and you're trying to figure out why your flashlight won't stay on, try clicking it a little bit faster. Or if you have another flashlight, I'm not familiar with every single flashlight out there, but for the most part, these handheld, or I'm sorry, these weapon lights for pistols do have a constant on and a monetary. So you just gotta kind of mess with it, read the instructions maybe from time to time.
I know we don't like doing that, but usually that information is in the manual.
Yeah, if you open up the manual, 99.9% of the time, it's like 2, 3, 4, 5 pages now, because they understand if somebody's gonna at least read the instructions, they need it like from point A to point B at the quickest way possible. Thank you, Internet.
Yes, but that's absolutely right. So when we start talking about our weapon lights, particularly in this case the pistol lights, a lot of these are set up so that if you rotate down in one direction, it'll stay on. If you rotate the other way, it'll be momentary. It'll pop back up. You can also, on the Surefires, just press
from the back,
and that will activate it as well. And that's good usually when I'm searching. When I'm shooting, I'll usually put it on to constant, because with recoil you can bounce off of that and you don't want that strobe effect. With the smaller lights, as Josh was saying, so if I hold this down and then release, it's momentary. If I click, like with a mouse, then it goes on to constant. And the same idea on the TLR7. So it's just a matter of getting that little click in there. So if I want to just see what I've got, I hold it down, I let go, it's going to be momentary. If I click it, then I'm going to get my constant on. And like I said, these switches are really, really good. Enforce first started that methodology of the dual switch, and all the other manufacturers have now kind of adopted that as well. In the case of the Surefire, the very common Surefire tail switch pressure pad, you'll have the front pad, which is your momentary, and then you'll have a constant on back here. This one from Modlite, this is so momentary, and then I've incorporated the Surefire tail cap here that has the constant on switch there, because there are times when you want the light to come on and stay on. And we're not going to get too much into those types of techniques. If you're interested in that, come take a class. I teach low light, lots of guys teach low light, and it's not rocket surgery, but you need to come out and experiment with these things, understand the why of why we do different techniques, and then choose the specific technique, the how, that's going to be most appropriate for you. All right, so switches we talked about now. The last thing is batteries. For most of your lights, you're looking at either the 123s, the 3-volt small ones.
Rechargeable, built-in.
Increasingly, we're going to, with the old lights, we have built-in systems, and this one as well, where it's all internal. With the other ones, you're increasingly seeing the rechargeable 18650 or 18350 batteries, and those are good because they're cheaper in the long run. You can recharge them many times, and they're geared towards giving you more output, so you actually get better performance out of the light. The last thing I'll say is on your 123s, not all batteries are created equal, and we have had trouble with some of the cheaper brands shorting out in the light and causing fires and actually burning up patrol cars and kit and stuff like that. So buy quality lights, quality batteries rather, and quality lights. Make sure you know what you're getting, get something that's reputable, so you get the best performance as far as output and also minimize any kind of
no Toys R Us batteries for your flashlight.
There you go. Okay.
Yeah.
So, I know that's a lot of information that we've covered. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please comment below. Give us a like, give us a share, and stay safe.